On today's Locked On Texans podcast, are the Texans better 1 week after free agency and making sense of the draft trade to the Minnesota Vikings?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers to this Monday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If this is your first time listening or watching the Locked On Texans podcast, thank you for stopping by. Please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And thank you to all of our returning listeners lending your ear, coming back one more time. You can be anywhere in the world, but you are listening to the Locked On Texans podcast. I'm your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy Hickman. On the other side of the screen, Texans credentialed media member, Sports Illustrated's own Cody Davis. We are looking at a few things today that I think are all very important conversations to have. Are the Texans better 1 week after free agency? I can't wait to talk about that personally. Missing out on Keenan Allen. How many misses has Nick Caserio had in 1 week? We open up today's episode looking at the draft trade with the Minnesota Vikings and trying to make sense of it. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. As we now know, at the time of this recording, Sunday at noon, we're time stamping everything, right, Cody? Got to do that.
First of all, let me just say, guys, as soon as I hit publish on Friday's show, that is when the news dropped that the Texans traded their first round draft pick. So please, hopefully you guys read the disclaimer when y'all was reading the description, but please forgive us because at that point had to go do some rocket stuff. We had no time to do another show.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy, and I was just like, I mean, immediately right after we did the trade, like, what happened, right? But that's right. The Houston Texans traded the number 23 overall pick for the 2024 NFL draft to the Minnesota Vikings in return for the number 42 overall pick in the second round and the number 188 overall pick in this year's draft, also a second rounder in 2025. So basically 2 second rounders back in the 1 6th-round pick for this year. Cody, what are your thoughts on this?
Man, first of all, let me just start by just looking at the trade in general. I'm just going to say right off the top, I just do not like it. In my opinion, I do not believe that the Houston Texans are in a position where they can just get rid of their first round pick. Look, I'm not going to say this is going to hurt the Houston Texans. However, John, when I was just taking a look at so many of the possibilities of what the Houston Texans can do with that number 23 overall pick, you played around with the idea of them, trading up somewhere in the top 10 or top 15 to go after one of the top wide receivers in the draft. Me personally, I'm looking at it from a standpoint, especially after you missed out on Eric Armstead, that 23 overall pick would have been vital in order for you to continue adding to your defensive front. And of course, everybody been playing around with the idea of pairing Derek Stingley Jr. with one of the top cornerbacks in this year's draft. And there was so many different possibilities. And with them trading that number 23 overall pick to Minnesota, I now feel like all of those possibilities are gone. Even the players. I mean, I think as of right now, the best player that could potentially be there at number 42 is Kool-Aid McKinstry. That's only because he's dealing with that foot injury. However, given how good Kool-Aid is, I do not expect for him to be there at pick number 42. So that's an issue. Look, this wide receiving class coming into the draft is deep. However, at pick number 42, there's going to be a plethora of prospects that's going to be taken off the board by the time the Houston Texans pick. However, that's the issue. By the time the Houston Texans pick, and I'm wondering, John, what does Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans have up their sleeve? The one thing that I've always kept going back to looking at this draft, Brian Belfield, Big Sarge from USA Today, Texans Wire, has said countless of times after the NFL Combine that he has talked to several people, and they always say that they felt that Nick Caserio has something up his sleeve. That is the only positive that I'm looking at this. Maybe they're going to, package some of those picks. By the way, they have like several 6 and 7 round draft picks in this year's draft, and without a shadow of a doubt that Nick Caserio is going to package those, maybe for a player, maybe to move up further into the draft. Don't know as of now, but that is the lone positive. This trade is just the start of something hopefully bigger before the draft starts in April.
So I find it funny. How often do we say hopefully?
A lot with this team.
A lot with this team, right? But specifically to Nick Caserio, like hopefully he has something, or but what if this is the plan, right? So there's a lot of ifs with Nick Caserio, and if was a fifth, say it with me,
we'd all be drunk.
Right. Right now the Texans now have 9 picks in this year's draft. 2 in the second round, 1 in the third round, 2 in the fourth round, a 5th rounder, and 3 in the 7th round. And we know that we got a 7th rounder back with the Malik Collins trade after giving up 1 for Joe Mixon.
Mm-hmm.
And according to your point, we know that Nick Caserio, I don't think he's ever just had a draft where he drafted where he was supposed to draft. The trade up for Nico, the trade up for John Minchie, the trade up for Tank, and that's just the receivers.
Look, right? Except for 2, that's the only time.
so right, we know that he will trade up. We know that he will give up assets, and I think that for me this year, I kind of felt like it was unnecessary to do that unless you were trading up in the first round. Just like how they did last year, right? You traded up for Will Anderson. I gave up a first rounder for that. But if I could make sense of this draft pick trade, I would say this. 3 ways to look at it, to make sense of it. Not saying I like it or not, but to make sense of it. Number 1, 23 to what we know about 42, there are that'll be 19 players that Houston feels will be available from 23 to 42 that will be available at 42. Maybe out of 19, that's 19 picks. So out of 19, maybe 10 of those players they feel will be available at 42.
Mm-hmm.
Kool-Aid, right, which is one of them, as you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Big T Sweat from UT, right? He's a guy that we know that Houston has to replace a D lineman. Rankins is gone. Malik Collins is gone. They brought in Tim Settle, didn't get Armstead. So now you look at the possibility of them replacing that body on that defensive front. They could do so late in the draft, but you would want them to get a premium player, which is why I think a lot of people are upset that they moved on from 23 because of the options you have at that pick. And I totally understand that, and that's a justifiable conversation and argument to have. But maybe there are players that they feel will be available at 42 that they could have gotten at 23. They also may look at this as a way to penny pinch a little bit because I don't have to pay a first-round tender contract to a player this year. Now I could just pay a second-round tender, to rookie on a rookie deal this year. And also, seeing Keenan Allen, who we'll talk about in the second segment, go for a 4th rounder this year, maybe because we've both been told that Houston is still doing their due diligence on this wide receiver market, whether it's coming by draft or whether it's coming by trade. So maybe this is Houston's way of preparing for that because also, guys, listen, they restructured Shaq Mason's contract over the weekend, and I think that was in large part for them to get ready for Keenan Allen, which didn't fall through, but that does not take away the money that was created. Now that we know that Houston has $19 million left in cap space. Don't take that away. They also released Jesse Matthews from the roster, right? Who do we expect for him to make this roster come season? No, but for Houston to unload and restructure, that still point towards getting that additional second round pick gives you flexibility to now say, well, here's a 3rd round pick for a player. over the weekend, we all saw the Stephon Diggs tweets. It's kind of tired at this point, but we saw him, right? T. Higgins is a guy that Houston has been linked to for a little minute now. And you got to wonder to yourself, does the Texans make a play for T. Higgins? Brandon Ayuk, right? I don't think he is the happiest with this situation, whether it be quarterback or just wanting to move on from San Fran for a bigger role and opportunity. Does Houston use maybe one of those second rounders for Ayuk? So I do think the flexibility is there for Houston in terms of being able to trade for a weapon, which we know Houston is still on the market to do so. It's disappointing that it hasn't come yet. It's disappointing that Robert Woods is still on this roster. You re-signed Noah Brown. It's disappointing that you were not able to get Keenan Allen, but that doesn't mean that the possibility of them not trading for a receiver isn't there. We've seen Houston kind of take care of special teams during free agency. We've seen Houston take care of the linebacker, replacing the linebackers. We've seen Houston bringing in a guy that can not only replicate the productivity of John Gennard, but we all believe can excel in his role. We've seen Houston. I would classify Houston as not getting a return back for the D tackle position for compared to the guys they lost. There's no Collins, there's no Rankins that they brought back in, but we've seen Houston address other needs. They have yet to address the wide receiver position. And no matter how you guys feel about CJ Stroud, no matter how impactful of a player he is, no matter how great we believe he is and will be, you cannot roll out next season with the same wide receiver group. No matter how we feel about Hutchinson, no matter how we feel about the potential of John Mechie, which if he does reach his potential, imagine an offense where Tank, Nico, a star receiver, and Mechie are your four options. Imagine that. Like, that'd be great. But you cannot do it. It's irresponsible, and it will be malpractice on the part of Nick Caserio if that happens. So I do believe, this is just me trying to make sense of it, they are really working behind scenes, and I don't know if it's a trick up his sleeve, but to bring in a weapon for this team offensively. That's the only way I can make sense of the draft trade. That's it. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. I did listen over the weekend, Thursday, right, on spring break with the wife, and we said, hey, you know what haven't we done? And we haven't went to a Rockets game in a while. So what did I do? I get on my phone, scroll over to Game Time. I got me a ticket. We got some very good seats. I was able to see where we were sitting, and we were in the club section. I had an opportunity to see my boy over there. He was at work.
Got y'all some ice cream.
Got us some ice cream, right? You may not get ice cream if you buy your tickets, but I got some ice cream over to the seats. But with Game Time, those are the benefits to view where you're sitting at, right? To get those last minute tickets, to have an opportunity to not stress when you're buying tickets, not only to sporting events, but music events, comedy events, and theater events all near you. And also killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, go ahead and download Game Time, the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners. We are now talking about missing out on Keenan Allen. And that was a rough one. I think that was tough for everybody. Keenan had his best year last year, despite how bad that team was in LA. Despite all of the adversity, Keenan Allen balled out, and Keenan Allen would have been a perfect match for this team. We talk about a guy that has historically made money off just being able to get open. One of the best route runners in the past 10 to 15 years. That's Keenan Allen. And we know that this team has put an emphasis on bringing in guys that can create separation. And so, Cody, the Bears offered, a fourth rounder to LA for Keenan Allen. And everybody was like, the Texans couldn't do that. The Texans couldn't do that. Why not? We needed him. We needed Keenan Allen because this team does, right? They do need him. What are your thoughts on missing out on Keenan
Allen? My number one thought, man, is the fact that the Chargers did not want to trade Keenan Allen to an AFC team. Plain and simple, man. Because according to Aaron Wilson, he reported on Saturday that the Texans got close on a potential trade for Keenan Allen. They had offered the Bears a 2025 third round selection with a pip swap in return. He did not say which round that the potential pick swap would be in, but after that report came out, I said to myself, man, the Chargers, they did not want to send Keenan Allen to another AFC team, especially a team that Keenan Allen can go to playing alongside another promising quarterback who, look, I understand it's been one season, but I think if we rank the top 5, top 10 quarterbacks entering 2024, CJ Stroud is going to be a step ahead of Justin Herbert. So that's probably Los Angeles thinking. But John, I get it from that standpoint, and I'm not about to say that I hate knowing that the Houston Texans missed out, because I look at it from a standpoint of, if they was offering a third round pick in next year's draft and it was willing to do a pick swap, Nick Caserio and Coach D'Amico Ryans did everything that they could. Then you would start, look, now maybe they could have added, let's say, a second round or a first round or whatever the case might be. Then you was going to have to look at it as an overpay, because as good as Keenan Allen is, he is 31 years old, which means his age is going to start to show, which means that the Houston Texans will probably start to get the decline of Keenan Allen. And what did we say last week? The one thing you got to give Nick Caserio, whether trade, whether free agency, no matter who the player is, they're never going to put themselves in a situation where they have a quote-unquote bad contract, or they have a player that's not matching the value of what they are paying. So, I get it to a certain extent. However, John, this goes back to as of why I did not like that trade of sending the number 23 overall pick to Minnesota, because to your point, they cannot roll out the same wide receiving core as last year. I get it. Nico Collins has taken the helm as this team's number 1 wide receiver. Tank Dell is phenomenal. However, it's going to take Tank Dell some time to get back to the player that he was prior to that leg injury. So we got to keep that in mind. And of course, John, to your point, the potential in Hutchinson and John Mechie and all this other stuff, it's still a whole bunch of if and can they take the next step. The Texans definitely got to do something to bring in another weapon in that wide receiving core.
And the thing about it was the Texans were willing to take on Keenan Allen's contract, which is currently constructed with $18.1 million base salary and a $5 million signing bonus, roster bonus, excuse me. And then they were going to work on an extension per league sources, according to Aaron Wilson. So in this case, man, listen, this is one of those situations where even with taking on 18.1 and a $5 million roster bonus
and draft capital,
and he is not guaranteed that he's going to be on a contract next year. Now, of course, same situation with Joe Mixon, and they were able to get an extension worked out, a 3-year extension. And so maybe you look at that happening with Keenan Allen, and I'm sure that'll happen with Chicago, which is where he's landed. They tried. They just missed out. This is not like the Saquon Barkley situation where they just didn't want to pay a lot of money, right? This ain't like some of the other situations we've seen in Houston where they were penny pinching, like the Armstead or maybe other deals. They tried. They legit tried. And I would even say, they restructured contracts, right, with Mason, and they were trying to get everything in line to take on this hefty price of Keenan Allen. That's $23 million you got to pay for this year. They tried, man. And for that, this is one of those situations where I'm like, okay, Nick, plan A didn't work out, like Saquon. Now let's move on. What's plan B? Joe Mixon. Now who's the backup wide receiver you guys are, on your radar, right? Is it the Diggs? Is it the Ayuk? Is it T. Higgins? Are you looking at saying, you know what? Do we just Tyler Boyd is a free agent. Do we just bring him in? And do we use the bulk of this money to address what I think they should be addressing? Safety, right? What do we do now? Because Keenan Allen's asking price, well, the demand price actually was kind of high, kind of crazy. And I think that they did a very good job of just figuring out, making way, getting prepared. Cody, to your point, I didn't even think of it like this. Maybe the Chargers just didn't want to trade him to the AFC team.
That's the only logic excuse.
Hayden.
I mean, like I say, I get it because the Chargers with Justin Herbert, they're trying to be in playoff championship contention too. And look, this ain't the same old Texans from the last 2 years. This is a team. Look, if everything fall right, put it like this, John. I think if the Texans make the AFC championship game next year, not too many people will be surprised as if the Los Angeles Chargers were to make the AFC championship game. The Houston Texans have surpassed them in that ranking. And that's why I say at the end of the day, they didn't want that, especially that problem. Stroud to Allen. Come on, man.
Yeah. But first, let's talk about Robinhood. And did you guys know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, guys. Listen up. There's no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. Definitely want to let you guys know that investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. And I also want to let you guys know that Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. We will be joined by my man Luke, Locked On Vikings for Tuesday episode, kind of discussing the trade, the 23 overall pick, discussing Danielle Hunter, discussing John Lenoir, discussing Blake Cashman. It seems like this year Minnesota for Houston is the last couple of years for the Browns. Like no matter what they do,
glad that's over.
No matter what we do, it's gonna be close together. But Cody, are the Texans better 1 week after free agency? And I'm gonna say no. I think that Houston is right where they were right before free agency. I think in some ways you could say that maybe they got better at this position, but because of the losses of other positions and because of the neglect of two positions, wide receiver and safety, while everybody else is getting better, then you can make the case that in some ways, maybe they are worse at this point at noon Sunday at the time of this recording. Because something could happen, right? But I think that they may be better on the edge. But D tackle, I don't think so. I think that they're better with the linebacker group. I think the running back position is slightly better, but you can make a case that with Joe Mixon getting a bulk of the carries that we believe he will, if that would have been the same for Devin Singletary last year, the outcome would have been the same. So I don't think that they're better. I think that they are just where they were at the start of free agency. I do like Jeff Okudah, right? But I don't know. They still need to address the cornerback position. Desmond King is a little bit older. Is Jeff Okudah better than Steven Nelson when healthy? I'm going to say no, right? I think he has the tools and traits and physical traits to be that and to do so, but I can't definitively say that now. So I'm going to go with no. Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie are your starting safeties at this time. Robert Woods and Noah Brown are still on your roster at this time, and we know that Noah Brown signed a 1-year contract. So, actually, with me saying this, you can make a case that they are slightly worse.
Mm. No,
And I may be in a minority with that.
I'm not gonna say worse. I would say they're just about the same. And it just goes back to John, to your point, the two positions that they haven't addressed yet, and that's safety and that's wide receiver. And you already know how I've been feeling about the safety unit in general, so I don't even have to repeat all that. But yeah, I would just say they're about the same, man. If the season was to start tomorrow, I wouldn't be surprised if it has the same trajectory as last year. You finish what, 10-7, you end up possibly winning the division, hosting a playoff game, then get bounced out in the second round, depending on the matchup, because it's just the same team. Now, granted, the only reason why I feel like they didn't get worse, and I know this is going beyond the players that they brought in, was just simply due to the fact that a lot of your foundational players are going to get better. And I think that's what will save them if the season will start tomorrow, man. But I just need to see them just add just a little bit more to this team, man. The safety market at the time of this recording, man, it still has a lot of good talent out there. The wide receiving core, John, I'm to the point after they made that trade with the Vikings, I'm to the point, how do you get better at the wide receiving position? Because I mean, like, one, who's out there?
Tyler
free
Boyd
agency
is out there. KJ Osborne is out there, but I think KJ and Robert Woods and Noah Brown are in the same tier of type of receivers. So, I think Noah Brown signing back eliminates his possibility. And we know that this team is still very high on John Mechie.
As they should be.
As they should be. You got a lot to tell this year.
But
I don't know.
That's why I say, like, when I look at this wide receiver market, I'm like, okay, how can
they free agents, not the trade?
Yeah, free agency. I'm like, and then you just mentioned the guys that match up with the timeline and that can still provide you something. Then, like, do you take a risk with somebody like Michael Thomas or something? Like, he probably only have nothing left in the tank.
Winfro, Odell, but those are guys. I don't know when's the last time Hunter had a good season.
I mean, Odell had a decent season, but I mean, I don't even think he had that much of a season, to be honest with you. Like, the Baltimore Ravens' success did not depend on Odell Beckham Jr. Let's just say that.
I will say in the second half of that season, we saw a much better version of Odell. It was the lack of accuracy from my man, I love him, Lamar Jackson, to get him the ball consistently for him to impact the team. So I will say that if you watch some of those games, there were moments where I felt like Odell should have been more of a factor. He was not able to because him and Lamar were just never on the same page.
I give you that, but even if they do get desperate and bring in a Michael Thomas or Odell Beckham or whoever that's a little bit further along in their career, you're looking at these type of players. These are the type of moves that you make, let's say, 2 weeks before training camp, and you just get desperate at that point. So I'm just a little bit concerned about this wide receiving core. I still hope they end up getting a deal done with Nico Collins, man. But outside of the wide receiving core, you still have to address safety. I'm starting to come around to Jeff Okudah. I think him
physically he's all there.
I think him being paired with Derek Stingley Jr. will be the best case scenario for him, because that definitely means he's going to drop down to cornerback number 2. And I think after everything that he's been throughout his career, another change of scenery, he's definitely going to have an opportunity to thrive, especially learning from Coach DeMeco Ryans.
And he thrived in that role last year on opposite sides of A.J. Terrell. Well, I mean, he gave up a few big plays like every corner in the league does. He had a few bad games, but I thought that last year was a very good redemption year for Jeff Okudah. So you may be looking at a player, low risk, high reward, who is now on the ascending part of his career after coming in as a first round a few years back and not necessarily getting it right. So this may turn out to be your future CB2 on a very good deal as well. So. But I think, losing out on those 2 D tackles, man, and then not being able to sign Armstead, which once the deal came out, I think everybody was like, I understand it. That was way too much, right? You can make a case that the defense took a hit. You can make a case that as of right now, the offense is still the same.
Yeah.
Actually, no, the offense is still the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, we talk a lot about does Nick have something up his sleeve? Our guy, Big Sarge, he got something up the sleeve. What's up his sleeve? Is it do free agency, or is it going to come through the draft? We don't know, but make sure that you guys continue to watch the Locked On Texans podcast here on YouTube. Follow us on YouTube and subscribe, like, and comment at Locked On Texans on Twitter as well. And follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.